Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of 9 to 5 Faith. I'm here with my new friends, Alex and Grace. How are you guys doing today?
Great.
Doing well.
Doing well.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk to you guys because also we get to nerd out a little bit together because our background in business and everything is so similar that we just kind of get each other. We don't know each other, but we get each other.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
You can start.
Yeah. Well, Grace, why don't you start?
Okay. Yeah, we live in the San Francisco Bay Area, like the Silicon Valley. And both of us are very passionate about empowering other believers to live out their faith. So this is why we connected, Paige, and why we're so excited to be here. So in terms of work, Alex works at a company called Udemy. He does customer success. He's a customer success manager and basically helps. I mean, you can explain it better. What do you do?
Yeah. So I work in tech. I'm a customer success manager that essentially means I help our customers become so successful that they are influenced to retain with us or keep. Well, my job is to preserve revenue and get revenue for our company at the end of the day. To put it very simply,
and to help them succeed in whatever their goals are business-wise.
Right. So that's the professional side of things. On the more personal side of things, we are small group leaders at our church. We've been leading for, I don't know, like individually and also together for like a few years, like maybe 2-3 years already. We've been married since December 2020.
Yeah. And for me, for work, my background's in marketing. So I used to work in tech. And then in middle of 2020, right before we got engaged, felt the call from the Lord to transition into full-time ministry. So I actually led our marketing efforts for our local church. It's like a multi-site church here in the Bay Area. And then last year, felt another tug from God to actually step out in faith and start doing more creative entrepreneurship, full-time content creation, and just ministry in general. So both of us now lead a podcast called Let's Unpack That with Alex and Grace. And yeah, we just love like encouraging people to live out their faith.
That's awesome. And I kind of love the name of your guys' podcast. When I saw that, it made me laugh so much because I'm like, that is such like a Christianese term where it's like, let's unpack that. Like,
yes.
No one really says
like in small
that.
Group. Like, hey,
yes.
Say? Let's unpack that.
No one says that. I'm in this writers group and they have a tendency to say more words about that. I'm like, I know what you mean, but also other people might not. So
like, what else would I say if it wasn't words?
Right. Like, let's unpack that because yes, that is very awesome. Well, thanks for kind of like that little intro. And also you guys got married December 2020. Like, holy cow.
Yeah.
Peak of COVID. And that was fun.
In the most strict district, I think, probably.
Right? Oh my gosh, that's true.
Yeah.
Come on, tell me about that. Like,
it was wild.
Was it a courthouse wedding or like?
So I don't know if I'll get in trouble. It's okay. It's already passed. So technically it was like lockdown, but we were like still wanting to do it. We had a very small, like very intimate. We had like 20, maybe 25 people in person, just our closest people. Yeah. But we also did a hybrid with Zoom with like 200 people on Zoom. But we were able to host it thankfully with our church because like they had been learning through COVID how to do church online, how to do hybrid experiences.
Gotcha.
And it was a wild time, but God pulled through. It was great.
That's awesome. I love those stories and I'm like surprised. I'm surprised Zoom didn't come out with like a spin-off product of like Zoom events, but it's like for like parties and everything. Like parties or weddings or like even funerals and stuff. Like something that would be like custom made for like an event like that. Because
that's a great opportunity.
Yeah, it's a great target addressable market.
Well, I mean, not even, it was January of this year. My grandmother had passed away, and there were still a lot of people who like couldn't make it, not for like COVID reasons, but just like couldn't make it. And we still Zoom called everyone in who couldn't make it to the funeral. And I'm like, you know, Zoom, if you're listening, hit me up. Right? Sponsor podcast.
Yeah, I feel like it's a norm now too. It's changed the landscape of events. Like people will often ask now, is there a virtual option, whether it's like a wedding or like a work event?
Wait, really?
Yeah, at least here in the Bay Area. Like when we did like a ministry night a few weeks ago. It was like lunch party / ministry night for our podcast. And then we I got people saying like, oh, I can't make it physically, but can I join online? And I was like, oh, we're not gonna have an online option, but thanks for assuming we would.
That's so interesting. Oh my gosh. I like need to think about that seriously because I know like work events and stuff, but like conferences, but like maybe not like, I don't know, like team building stuff and everything. It's like having it hybrid. Like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that.
I guess it's just different here. I mean, even for Alex, your work situation is hybrid and there's like people on screen, but also people in person, and it just depends.
Yeah, I feel like it's just different regionally too.
Yeah.
Like every place has their own unspoken rules now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. And we can totally like, I feel like we could talk for hours about like the tech space and what happens in there. We can unpack that. Absolutely. So how I like to kind of frame this up is just take me through what a day in the life looks like for you guys. And like how you move throughout your week and your regular day, and like where does God fit in and where does work fit in and all of that good stuff.
Yeah. I guess, or do you want to start?
Do you want the ideal version or the actual version?
No, the actual version. We keep it real here.
Oh, okay, great. So in the beginning, God created the world, just the universe. So in the morning, I fortunately am pretty consistent with my quiet times with God. So what that looks like is, and I don't time it or anything. It's just whenever my first meeting is. But I usually am always in the Word. I like to, so I read the Word, meditate on it, pray on it, and then I take walks. I love taking walks. Fortunately, we live in a pretty safe area, so we can go out safely to take walks. So I usually put on my AirPods and take a walk, like about like a 30-minute walk, and I just listen to worship music and even sing worship and pray during my walk. And I do that pretty consistently every morning. And then work comes. That's where I'm just doing work, and I wish I could say I involve God more, and I want to do it more consistently. But what I've done in the past is I look through my calendar on my phone and just pray through each meeting, like, God, what do you want me to say to this person, this situation? Sometimes I even ask God for miracles about difficult work situations. But yeah, I just go about doing my work, and then
but every day looks different too.
Yeah, every day is different. There's no standard day for me. But the one consistent thing is the morning.
Yeah. I think you can also mention, if you're comfortable, but the ways that you like minister to coworkers and even your managers, and like how you integrate faith with that.
Yeah, that's right. So we do have some Christians at work, so I meet with them. not on a consistent basis. I wish it was more consistent, but um, I meet with them, just get to know them, hear about their life story, and we pray for each other as well. So whenever we have like team offsites or whenever there's a more in-person event, then yeah, we make it a point to meet. If it's virtual, it's just over Zoom and we get to know about each other and we pray for each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Grace, tell me a little bit about that transition for you of going from a secular workplace into ministry and then kind of onto your own. I feel like those
Yeah.
are three very distinct and very different kind of environments to be working.
100%. That's why I was gonna say, my answer to this question is, it's looked so different in my different seasons of my career and work. And I was just even reflecting on like how back when I worked in tech, I had a very interesting, it was like so clear, like when I brought my Bible to work or my journal to work, I actually was not distracted. I know other people feel differently, but I wasn't distracted like, oh, I have to get to work right away. I don't know, I was just in a different headspace back then, like bringing my Bible and my journal. I did my quiet time in the cafeteria like before I started work. And that was the best way for me to like get my head focused of like, what is God telling me today? What do I need to focus on, instead of like rushing to like, oh, I have to make my commute and then I'm rushing in my quiet times, you know?
Right.
But yeah, and then when I transitioned into ministry, oh, and then sorry, I'll go back later, but when I transitioned into ministry, it looked a lot different because now ministry is everything on the outside is like, everything's for God, right? Everything looks like God glorifying or seems like it. And so it's very easy. I think I was telling Alex this, like when I joined our church staff, I was like, wow, it's very easy to like lose your true, genuine, authentic relationship with God because you're doing performance for God, and you kind of subconsciously justify like, oh, this is for God, like I'm spending time with God, but you're not really like going deep with him necessarily. And no one does that intentionally either, but I just see that that's a common thing. And then now that I am doing like more creative entrepreneurship, and I think a lot of people actually are launching out new businesses, I'm seeing it's definitely been like so a really rewarding and also challenging at the same time like season, because I feel like I'm able to tailor my schedule, like okay, my energy, like in the morning I want to just like focus on God, like really spend time with him. I'm not going to try to book meetings in the mornings at all, so I try to do all my meetings and all my interviews and whatnot in the afternoons, and then that way I can like be more intentional with my time with God and just like making sure I'm not trying to rush or hurry or produce out of my own strength, but I'm really like daily surrendering to God and asking him to lead my steps as an entrepreneur. And I know you get this too. It's like very easy for you to want to just rush and like produce things real quick. Like, let's just get this done. There's so many things to do. And you can very easily lose yourself in that cycle if you're not conscious and intentional about the rhythms. So I feel like faith and work has looked very different. Those are just examples on time with God, but like even integrating it, like versus, you know, working in a secular workplace looks different, working with other Christians looks different, and working for yourself looks different too.
Yeah, for sure. And to be honest, Grace, like you're not the first person who I've talked to who has struggled in working in a ministry or working in a church with that kind of balance and that ebb and flow of like figuring out like, yes, you do church on Sunday, but like, are you working or are you like attending and participating? You know, it looks really different.
And I'll say it's really hard to separate, like even now, I'm not even on church staff, but it's like because you have that experience and you kind of almost like know too much, you have a different lens on it. And I was listening to a podcast from Carrie Newhoff and John Mark Comer talking about like as founding pastors when they left their churches, like how hard it was for them to just receive because they were so used to like decades of being a pastor and like owning and being responsible for all the mistakes that would happen. So for me personally, like that's an ongoing like journey and processing that I do with God of like, okay, God, how are you leading me to really like make sure my soul is filled and not just like doing the motions, but not really necessarily like receiving from you?
Yeah, and I think too, and I've never worked like on staff at a church, but I think my idea of kind of how people go into it is this idea that, oh, it's going to be great, it's going to be wonderful because like
Right.
everyone's Christian, and what, while that's true, it's also like, well, it's almost a little more difficult because everyone's
Mm-hmm.
Christian, but
Yeah.
also everyone's like flawed. And so you're in this like
Yeah.
really intense space where like at work, Alex, you and me, like we know that like if we screw something up, like aside from our own integrity, right? There's not as much of a focus lens
Mm-hmm.
on some of those screw ups.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say wherever you work, there's its own unique set of challenges. You're never
Yeah.
gonna enter like paradise of like everything's perfect, because yeah, for me personally, I've seen that a lot, like what you were just saying about ministry, and everyone's broken and flawed, but you're also like a family in Christ, but you also like are discipling people that you're working with, and everything's blurred together. So it takes a lot of wisdom and discernment, and
Mhm.
just making sure your heart is in the right place, whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like in the tech space, it's at least where I am in the San Francisco Bay Area and working in tech, it can be difficult to be a Christian because you have a
Mm,
lot of values that are counter
Clashing.
to your
yeah.
values.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can already think of many like controversial topics.
Right.
And yeah, we won't get into that.
I mean,
But
we can get into that. I have plenty to say too. So only if you want to, Alex, but I'm locked and loaded on that if you would like to.
uh yeah, I mean, like LGBTQ, how
Hmm.
do you respond to that as a Christian?
Right.
Those are things I'm wrestling through. Like, what do you do when your
Yeah.
workplace celebrates that?
Hmm.
Transgender. These are very sensitive topics
Nuanced. Yeah.
Right.
that we have to wrestle with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, there's at work, it's the competing priorities and the pressures and the
Hmm.
deadlines and all that stuff that goes with it. And it can be difficult to involve God in it, because for me, when I'm like doing a PowerPoint deck or writing emails, I don't really think about God as much as I
Right.
should. It's more like I just gotta get this done.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, like I've definitely encountered issues that you're reflecting, and then some more that, we're not mentioning of I feel like, the LGBTQ is kind of just right there on the surface that again, it's very nuanced and very, personal and situational, and it is hard to balance kind of your own values and your own kind of moral compass
Mm-hmm.
when you're being asked to participate in maybe even celebration of these different things that you might not agree with.
Oh
And
yeah.
and that's hard.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's when your faith is really tested. Like, okay, what am I going to stand for right now? And how do I
Yeah.
do it graciously and lovingly,
Yeah.
but also not compromising who I am and what I believe in?
Yeah.
I always think of an example. I won't say who he is, but
Right.
he's one of our friends. He was an executive at a company very high up, and worked very closely with the CEO. And he's a strong the guy I'm talking about was a strong believer, or is a strong believer. And he told Alex's testimony about like how during Pride Month everything was being celebrated, and he couldn't like sign his name. He just couldn't compromise. He didn't
Mm,
want to, and he stood up for that. And he actually expressed like, this is like I support this team and everything, but for this cause, I personally like my values don't align with it. And I thought that
mm-hmm.
was so bold. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
that is so great to be able to see an example of like boldness and almost a little bit like being in a persecuted,
Right.
culture. I know it can't compare to actual like the persecuted church in
Right.
some countries, but in a way, I think in small ways, Christians, we often feel that way when we're in a culture that celebrates things that are not, you know, aligned with biblical values.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's like, I feel like there are small ways in which Christians get challenged that people who have a more secular view on the world might not even think of, kind of the internal kind of headbutting that goes
Right.
on. Like,
Yeah.
I think of some things as simply as putting your pronouns in your email signatures. And if you're mandated
Oh
to do
man,
that,
Don't get us started. Yeah, we talk about that
we
a
have
lot.
opinions.
yeah. And I mean, here's the deal. Like, for me, I'll give my opinion, and you guys feel free to jump in if you would like. But like, for me, I'm like, I am not against you doing that if that is what you choose to do. If you want to do that, that is fine. Those beliefs are counter to my understanding of how God created the world. So I do not subscribe to kind of that who's Jordan Peterson, gosh, I'm losing the word, compelled speech. There we go. I'm not, on board with that level of compelled speech. And so, there's very real implications where, someone's like, no, just put like her on your email signature. Like, what's the big deal? And then for me, I'm like, no, that actually, like, it means a lot to me to be called a daughter of God, and and I hold that really in high esteem.
Yeah, it's really, really tricky. We actually do. I'm thinking about this topic a lot because actually this past week we recorded an interview with one of my friends who used to live like a very openly gay lifestyle, but Jesus met her and encountered her so powerfully that she left that relationship of 10 plus years, and now she's a full-time missionary in Mozambique.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, we're really excited to like share that episode, but it really just reminded me again, like there's so much confusion in our culture, right? Like there's so much that the enemy uses to make it seems very good on the outside. It seems like everyone accepts it, so it must be right. And the sad thing, the danger I think that we see, especially in liberal areas, is like it's very easy for Christians to forget like what does God actually say about these things, because you're constantly being surrounded by these influences. And so there's a lot of deception. That's why it's more important than ever, I feel, and we talk about this a lot, like increasingly we see like darkness in our culture, and so it's even more important for us to guard our hearts, guard our minds, make sure we are very consistent and in investing in our relationship with God, because if we don't, we every day we have so many things coming at us that are trying to lie and take us away from God's truth, and just like have us compromise.
I feel like this can reverberate to many different areas that seem neutral as well. So like here, I can only speak for the Bay Area, but there's a lot of compromises with money, career, sleeping around. And it's very easy, like me working in tech, it's very easy to be swept into that. Fortunately, I'm married, so I don't sleep around, but I hear about it often. But like one example is something as neutral as money. Like even as Christians, and we hang around so many like Christian tech people, but they have a bent towards like making more money. Not that it's like wrong with it, but sometimes it can be an idol if you're too obsessed with it. And you're not being watchful of your intentions and where you're placing your attention.
Like because money and anything like jobs, career, anything, it's like a neutral thing, but when it becomes an idol, when you're so obsessed with it, you're constantly talking about it like every single conversation, then that is like a sign, like, oh, make sure you're not putting your foundation security on these things that the world is trying to sell you as like this is what you need to live a fulfilled life.
And one thing too that I have really been kind of just mulling over, especially in the conversation of gender and sexual orientation and all of that is, and it has to do with our careers too, is where do we get our identity from? And I think too, like, our culture doesn't necessarily accept this idea that we get our identity from something that is much bigger than us. And that, like, my identity is not who I sleep with or how I want myself to appear to the world. My identity is in Christ and in Christ alone.
Right.
And you're talking about money and you're talking about promotions, like even that stuff. I've noticed it's really hard to avoid people who are unable to detach their personal identity from their work identity.
100%. Yeah, I think I noticed this, or we talk about like noticing this when like you meet someone for the first time and the first thing they say, it's like they're almost telling you their LinkedIn profile, like,
Right.
oh, I do this, I've done this, and it's like, oh, interesting, like, why are you so adamant about like talking about all the things that you do when God actually cares about who you are, not what you do? Like, he does care about what you do, but that doesn't define you, right?
Right.
But it's so ingrained, especially in Western, I think, American culture. We're always talking about work. I hear a lot from like when I used to work with like people in like Spain and Europe, they would always say like, over there people talk about your family, or like well, what you like to do for fun, and they don't talk about work nearly as much as Americans or people in the Western world. Yeah.
Alex, anything to add there?
No, Grace said it well.
Yeah, I think too, like, I don't know if either of you guys have like encountered this, but with kind of the job promotions, I've told this story on the podcast before, but like I remember we had a mandatory like job ladder worksheet that we had to fill out. Like, where
It's
do you
mandatory?
Yes, it was mandatory.
Wow, nothing. I've never heard of something mandatory except compliance training.
No. This was like you had to fill it out as part of like your yearly review, and you had to fill out like your, career journey ladder thing, that of like, what do you want to do? How do you want to get there? And what are the checkpoints along the way that you're going to make sure you are getting there? I'm like, I just want to bring home a paycheck. Like,
I don't know.
Can I continue to get paid? Like, that's my career growth.
It just shows again like the difference. It's kind of like what you were saying earlier, like people don't think about how much that small thing might mean to someone with different values, because I'm thinking from HR's point of view, they're probably like, oh, like this is a great culture building thing, like we're showing our employees we support them in their career path, because that is an increasingly big thing that people look for with their managers, is like, do you support me not just in my role but like my whole career journey? But I totally agree. I think back when I was working in my secular environment, I would constantly get questions like, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year vision? I'm like, I
don't even know my 1-day plan.
Right.
I have no career ambition. I mean, I just want to do a good job, but I'm like,
Right.
honestly, I'm here for God's mission, and I'm not really like thinking about like getting to director level. I don't even know if I want that.
Right.
Yeah, Alex was saying the same thing, even for him, like not being sure, like when people ask him.
Yeah, honestly, I used to, like, earlier in my career, early 20s, I actually did have a 10-year plan. And then I got older and I realized, oh wow, nothing really happens as planned. So I'm just like, scrap that. Yeah, I had plans to go to Harvard Business School and go into consulting, but yeah, I definitely haven't done any of that. Nor do I want to. Where was I going with that?
Talking about titles and
like there's so much importance and value that society assumes that you should just have, and then so we get confused as Christians, like, oh shoot, should I care about that? What's wrong with me? Why am I not caring about that? But I do think, like, when it comes to like planning and vision, I think God will give you his vision for your life, and so if anyone's like listening or watching, like you can relate to that, one thing I've been learning, especially in my own entrepreneur journey, is like, oh, the vision that God gives each person is different. And that's why this whole time I haven't felt like I fit in a box, because we're not meant to all fit in the same box. So yeah, don't measure your ambitions or your dreams or whatever it is with what society tells you should have, because there's no like right answer.
Yeah, there's a Bible verse that I've been meditating on recently, that's speaking to me this season. I forget where it is in the Bible, but it says something like contentment with godliness is great gain. And I feel like we don't live in that kind of society that values godliness, righteousness, character, and then contentment. Just like, hey, I'm happy where I am. I am content. But we're always, especially you know, being in tech too, you're subconsciously like chasing the next thing, your next role, promotion, salary increases. But honestly, God just wants us to be content. And now that I'm older, before I had plans, now I honestly just want to do stuff I enjoy. I just want to like work in the intersection of my passions and my talents and my personality
and the
needs of the world. I think there's a graph that shows all that.
Can I add one quick thing? Like it's related, but a little bit of a tangent, but I just felt like I felt like God like really impressed this on my heart. I like when we talk about like contentment and just like not these things that seem countercultural, right? Like one example I was thinking of in tech especially is we're always talking about year-over-year growth or measurable impact. Like don't tell me like what you did, tell me your impact. Like there's so much value on that. And again, on the outside, it's like, oh yeah, that's really good to think about your impact, to measure your growth. Like we all want to grow. Growth is a good thing. But I felt really convicted like this past season. God's been speaking to me about sometimes the kind of growth he's doing actually doesn't even look like growth on the outside. You can't even perceive or measure it. You can apply that not just in ministry or business or work, but also your personal life, your spiritual growth. You know, some dry seasons you're in, you're like, what the heck? Like, why am I not seeing more fruit? And I just think that thinking that society and a lot of our workplaces drill into us, like we have to always be outwardly growing, and seeping into some ministry mindset too, it can become unhealthy if we're like constantly expecting it has to always look a certain way. When you look at the Bible and Joseph had a dream, but then he went to prison and like everything went backwards for him seemingly. But God was just preparing him for that calling. And same with David being anointed, right? But then he was still a shepherd and he was still like persecuted. And it's like, I think as Christians, we often like forget that growth and what's like good in God's eyes is just it's not the same as to how we measure that in our society.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. And I can completely relate to everything you guys are saying, because I feel like there is this real pressure on people who are especially in kind of more white collar roles to just kind of buckle down and like predict your future really. And I remember like when I was in like this review and I was like filling out that mandatory worksheet of like, where are you gonna be in 5 years? I was like, I don't want to be working here in 5 years. Like I want to like have my book published in 5 years. Like me in 5 years has nothing to do with this or my job. Like has nothing to do with that.
Right. And you're like, how honest should I be right now?
All right. Like, do you want my honest truth, or like just kind of what I think I should be saying here?
Yeah.
So,
but I think it's also like those points though are revealing to you of what are the things that God really is stirring in your heart. Because I remember having that exact conversation. I would say now it's 2023. It was like 2018, 2019. So about 4-ish years ago, like my manager back in my tech role asked me that same question, like 5 years from now, where do you see yourself? And I was like, honestly, I mean, I didn't say like ministry like out explicitly, but I was like, I really have this passion. I don't know what it looks like, but I want to inspire people with my stories. And I feel like, you know, I just have a lot of stories and experiences and things that I learned that I want to like use that to inspire people to live out their potential, live out their calling. And I remember how ridiculous it sounded when I said that, and I just felt so silly. But then 4 years later, it's not even 5 years yet, but 4 years later, this is actually happening through our podcast, through what we're doing. And that's another encouragement to anyone listening, is like, don't feel like, oh, those ideas and dreams have nothing to do with what I'm doing now, so it must not be realistic, because it really is. It could be like God's planting seeds, and he's just excited to show you how it's going to come to fruition later on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like, that kind of awkwardness, it puts Christians who have to answer those types of questions in a weird place, because I can explain it, but the person on the other side probably doesn't understand it.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I want to say, I want to tell my stories and have it change people's lives. And they're like, okay, like,
I want you to meet your OKRs.
right. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Right.
And so, you know, I think that like awkwardness is like a reason why I don't want to speak for you guys, but a reason why for me, I've like held back in speaking my faith in the workplace, and I hope my behavior has shown you know, that I love the Jesus, but it's awkward to speak to it because people just don't understand.
Yeah.
I mean, I talk about faith a bit at work, but I don't share Jesus that much. Obviously, behaviors and actions speak louder than words, but I think I feel like I've been thinking about Revelation lately, just like second coming of Jesus, and
I think we all feel
like I feel like there's more of a sense of urgency to take bigger risks. And so even today, I was talking with my manager about our podcast and how she never asked what it's about, but I did say it's about my faith. So
it's obvious, and she's seen all your LinkedIn posts, so I'm sure she knows.
Yeah. No one asked. It's so awkward. But I'm just more outward about it and unashamed. Like, so one thing is one practical thing I do is on LinkedIn. As a customer success manager, you tend to have a more LinkedIn connections as you grow in your career
with your clients.
With my clients. So and just like the companies you work for and just the people you meet too. But one thing I do is I share my faith on LinkedIn because the algorithm is great. And it gets more views than like Instagram or Facebook. And also it's such a vast mission field, if you were to think of it that way, because many people on LinkedIn aren't Christian, but on our Facebooks and Instagram, our friends are mostly Christian. So
true.
I definitely share my faith. I give glory to God whenever something good happens, and I share it. And it's just a way to make disciples of all nations.
I think on the topic of specifically work, like if you think of all those platforms, LinkedIn is the most like work centric. That's where everyone's, you know, always saying, I'm humbled to announce my promotion. And like, you know, everyone's kind of like side-eyeing each other, like competing and trying to climb the corporate ladder or climb whatever ladder, you know. And if you see like a countercultural post on there, it actually stands out even more. So even when Alex was talking, I was thinking about like the layoffs, or many waves of layoffs that happened. I remember both of us posted things that are like just reminding people like, hey, like layoffs are really hard and we're so sorry for people who are going through it. But also wanted to like give you guys a gentle like encouragement and reminder that your worth is not in your work. Your performance doesn't dictate who you are. And we just like wrote things that, again, I think we did mention our faith, but just wrote things to be a light in the darkness, because there was so much grief going on of people being so angry, so anxious. And I think when you see that happening, maybe like just ask yourself or ask God, like, what are some ideas? What are some ways, low-hanging fruit, that I can step into that place of darkness and be your reflection of the light of your reflection and your truth.
Yeah.
So
And that's one of the reasons too I wanted to start this podcast, is because I'm like,
yeah.
I feel like there's like a lot of like secret Christians out there. Like not so
Yes.
much.
There definitely is.
Yeah.
When I posted on LinkedIn, a bunch of them came out.
Yeah. And I think too that's just like an encouragement for us to step out in boldness, you know,
Yes.
and step out in courage.
Yeah,
Because
throughout
like,
debate.
yeah, because like people go, oh, me too, or like, yeah, that's
Right.
me. And then you can have a further group of community than you had originally anticipated. And
Totally.
also just like make more of an impact on your workplace.
That's a huge, I'm very passionate about that. Like the fact that most people they're like, oh, I know I have to be on mission for God, but then you're trying to do it alone. Whenever you go on a mission trip abroad, you always go with a team. You always have people praying for you intentionally. Like we're not meant to do mission alone. And I think a lot of people get that wrong, and then they're like, oh, why is it so hard, so frustrating? Because like God designed you to like partner with other believers, whether it's maybe it's not in your company necessarily, it could be in your industry or in your area, whatever it is. But I have seen personally like so much fruit come out when I'm not doing things by myself, when I'm like linking arms with other believers in my workplace or in my area, and just being like, hey, we're both doing this, we're both trying to like bring heaven into this workplace, so how can we like do that together? And I always like make the analogy of like the Avengers, you know, like you see like Captain America is so cool and like Hulk so cool, but then they always have weaknesses. Everybody has weaknesses. And so it's only when like they all come together, that's why it's so powerful whenever we see like superhero movies and like everybody comes together to like get each other's backs, because that's exactly what we're designed to do as Christians. And you know, Alex has a lot of, I don't know if you want to share like some testimonies of how you found Christians at your workplace, and then how you like started praying with each other and just feeling that encouragement, like you're not alone, you're not the only Christian trying to like do your Christian thing.
Yeah, in every company that I've worked for, I made it a point to connect with other Christians. Some companies harder than others. I would say, like the company now, probably I can count the number of Christians on one hand. Unfortunately,
that you know of.
I know of. That have come out, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, really just I make it a point to connect with them, to pray for them, pray with them, get to know them, and just rally people together. I think one of the most memorable times I've had was I'm not going to name names and companies, but at a previous company, one of the executives, like a C-level executive, was Christian, and he invited me to go to it was like a work conference. So he invited me and a bunch of other Christians to go to his hotel room and just have fellowship and pray for one another. And that just sparked like so many things for me. And after that, I began to intentionally connect more with Christians and really rally and pray with each other. And I've sort of carried that over to other companies too.
And then that's also, he recently found out one of his directors on his team is Christian. He's like, what? I had no idea. But because she had commented on one of his podcast posts, he was like, what? Is she Christian? So it's like all these little ways, the more like you're just naturally a light, and the more you like pray for and seek out other believers, like God will highlight and bring them into your life. It might not be immediately, but like I do think it's so powerful to look for that and know that you're not supposed to do it alone. One other like mini testimony too. I remember like talking to this one particular person. Like I knew he was Christian, but you could tell he wasn't very like confident about like bringing his faith to work. He was like, oh, this is where I work, and then faith is kind of like on the side, like my personal thing. But then many months after I talked to him, because we just connected, and I was like sharing with him, like, you know, there's a lot that I feel like God wants to do in our workplace. Many months after, he just suddenly randomly reached out to me and was like, hey, Grace, I really feel like God actually wants me to start bringing my faith into my work more. Like, I kind of have this like vision or thought of like just praying together and like maybe starting a prayer group. And then what's crazy is like literally, I think it was that week or the week before, I had the same conversation from another girl I was talking to who said she felt like God
Wow.
was stirring her to also like pray more and intercede for our workplace. And so I was like,
Mm,
wow, that's crazy. Well, let me like connect you guys because you guys have the same vision. Fast forward, it's been like, I think it's been at least 6 or 7 years, and that group to this day is still existing. It grew from
wow.
2 people, 3 of us, I guess, 3 of us
Yeah.
meeting together every week. And it grew to a global thing where like I think 30, 40 people now from all over the world are tuning into that prayer and intercession group every week.
Wow.
And it just goes to show like, in our workplace we talk about the importance of meeting and collaboration and like not doing double work, and I think
Right.
it's the same in God's kingdom. Like the more we seek out connections and work together, the more we can synergize and be like, wait, I have that vision, you have that vision, let's do it together and see what he does from that.
Yeah. That was a very marketing term, by the way. Synergize. Very marketing. That's a 10-point
We have a
word
lot
right
of
there.
business jargon in our vocab now.
No, I dig
We
it
can
because
circle back.
when like my ears perked up, I was like, oh yeah, that's like one of those 10-point words. Uh and if you're listening to this and like you're hearing this, like maybe it's you who
Yeah.
needs to be that light
Mhm.
in your workplace, and to step out in boldness, because if if it's not someone, then who, right? Like if it's
Yeah.
not going to be you, then who's going to do it? And maybe God wants to use you as kind of that, that hub to kind of turn things around.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that quote, like be the change you want to see in the world. It's the
Yeah.
exact same thing when you're thinking, if there's a burden on your heart, like why isn't this happening? Why isn't that happening? Like it could very well be God is asking you to be the one to start and
Yeah.
initiate and lead something. And
Yeah.
don't put pressure on yourself. It has to look like this amazing big movement. It's just like that little step of obedience. That's what really matters. And the
Yeah.
outcome is up to God, like what he will and wants to
Mm,
do. But yeah, I think often we get in our heads about it like, oh, I'm not a powerful leader, or I'm not a minister, like people are going to judge me, or I'm going to say the wrong thing. And
right.
that's just the enemy trying to dissuade you from
Mm,
doing God's work.
yeah,
So yeah,
for
I think
sure.
that's why it's so powerful to link arms with other people, because then you can encourage each other instead of getting in
Yeah.
your head about like, I can't do this.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful too. And fun fact, that's how this podcast started, is because I had this idea for 5 years. 5 years. And
Wow.
It's amazing.
Congrats on taking the step.
Yeah.
thank you. I was like, yeah, this still doesn't exist in the world.
Yeah.
Pre and post COVID. So I might as well do it. So that's how we landed here. All right, you guys. And to kind of wrap up this conversation, I always like to leave our listeners with something that they can walk away with and implement in their lives today, this week, this weekend, whenever they're listening to this, to help their faith grow, to help their discipline, and spiritual practice grow. So, what can they do? What do you do that they can do in their lives?
Well, there's so many things. Gosh,
Just choose one.
which one to pick? Okay, really practical one. When you're communicating with people, whether especially email or we use Slack, pray for them.
Mm,
Super easy. Pray for them. Ask God, what do you want me to say? How do you want me to write this? And
mm,
that's just the practice of involving God in your daily life.
I
Yeah,
love that.
for me, I would say, oh gosh, I'm so tempted to do two, but I will pick
Just
one.
one.
Yeah, I would just say, ask God, how can I partner with you, God, in whatever you're already doing? Show me how you're already moving in my workplace or in my
Mm,
whatever sphere of influence, because God doesn't expect you to create your own waves. Like you don't need to create something out of nothing. Like he's already always moving and working.
mm,
It's just about hopping on his train, like surfing his waves that he's already making, and asking him like, what's my role in it? And you'll be very surprised. Like once you start intentionally asking God, he's gonna open your eyes to see how he's working and how you can be a light, and how why he picked you to be there at this specific time and place. So yeah, I think that gives you a lot more clarity and like vision for your kingdom purpose wherever you are.
And be willing to act on it.
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. And where can people find you and find the Let's Unpack That podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast is called Let's Unpack That with Alex and Grace. There's actually a lot of Let's Unpack That podcasts. So it's the one, I mean, you'll see our faces.
With Alex and Grace.
Yeah, so yeah, we talk about all sorts of things about just like real life. We love talking about faith and work too. That's actually fun fact. It's one of the reasons why we even met was because I was talking about faith and work, and then Alex slid into the DMs. That's a story for another time. You can find us on Instagram at with the trans. That's our last name, Tran. And also Facebook, all the social medias. So
awesome. Thank you guys so much. And we'll have to do this again. Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks, Paige.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for joining us. If you liked what you were listening to, make sure you subscribe and hit those 5 stars, and we'll catch you on the next episode.